Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Magdalene Street podcast. We're really very happy to have with us Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. But before I introduce him briefly, I just want to remind everybody to please, if you can, to rate and review this podcast wherever you're watching this or listening to it, because it really helps us. It helps the reach, especially these days where the algorithms seem to be working against any kind of platform that is pushing a kind of a pro-Palestine perspective. So we would really appreciate any kind of rating and reviewing, and on YouTube as well. So with that in mind, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who is probably one among the most prominent Palestinian voices in the world today. He's a medical doctor who founded 4 decades ago the Palestine Medical Relief Society, and has actively participated in Palestinian social movements on the ground and in formal politics for 3 decades. Most notably, he has been serving as the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative, المبادرة الوطنية الفلسطينية, since its founding during the Second Intifada in 2002. And he also ran for the presidency the last time there were actual elections in Palestine in 2005, and he placed second with 20% of the vote. So we're really very pleased to have him. Dr. Mustafa, welcome. All right, so I'm going to get to the first question. Dr. Barghouti, with the international press having moved on, can you just first, before we start, can you just describe to us the situation today in what is supposed to be a post-ceasefire Gaza and even in the West Bank? But we're supposed to be in the ceasefire phase, but clearly every single day we hear about all sorts of death and killing. So could you describe to us the situation today, and perhaps also talk to us a little bit about the role of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society that provides so much support on the ground, and perhaps other kinds of organizations like that?
Well, the ceasefire was declared on the 10th of October this year, 25. And since then, Israel did not respect it. So practically, the ceasefire was declared, but the war is still going on. Since October 10th, Israel has violated the ceasefire agreement 875 times, which led to killing no less than 420 innocent civilian Palestinians in Gaza Strip, and the injury of more than almost 1,000, actually more than 1,000, 1,112 people. This is all because Israel is not respecting the ceasefire and continues the bombardment of Gaza. But that's not the only aspect of Israel's violation of the ceasefire agreement. The other aspect is that it never opened or allowed the Rafah crossing to be opened. And it is still closed, although the agreement said it should have been opened in both directions. And Netanyahu keeps declaring that if he opens it, he will open it only in one direction, which is towards Egypt. And that means preventing thousands of Palestinians waiting in Egypt who are trying to come back. And that means he never gave up his idea of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in Gaza. The third element of Israel's violation is the obstruction of supplies of humanitarian aid. According to the agreement, 600 trucks of humanitarian support should have been allowed into Gaza daily. What Israel is allowing ranges between 200 and 300 in the maximum. So practically, according to our statistics, Israel is allowing only 34% of what should have happened. Given also the fact that Gaza actually needs more than 600 trucks a day. It needs at least 1,000 trucks of humanitarian aid daily. But the issue is not only about quantitative obstruction, it's also about the quality of what is allowed into Gaza. A lot of most equipment are not allowed into Gaza. Heavy machinery are not allowed in. The heavy machines that people need to deal with the 60 million tons of rubble are not there, and Israel is not allowing them in. In medical area, we are facing very serious shortage of medical equipment and medical supplies and medications. Very, very serious. The whole of Gaza, 2.2 million people, does not have a functioning single MRI. I mean, that gives you an idea about what's going on. People who need kidney dialysis do not have enough machines. Israel bombarded 10 of our medical centers, 11 actually medical centers before the war, the ceasefire was declared. And these centers included the most vital equipment, which we are unable to replace or rehabilitate up till now because Israel is blocking the supplies. So from every aspect of the matter, Israel is not really respecting the ceasefire. And it is still occupying 53% of the Gaza Strip. And instead of shrinking that space, they are expanding it from time to time. And they are not, in a way, respecting any aspect of the ceasefire agreement. But the war is not only happening in Gaza, it's also happening in the West Bank, where we are subjected to settler terror. We've counted 8 to 10 attacks every day in the last 2 years of settler terrorist groups that act as gangs of terrorists, resembling the terrorist groups that attacked Palestinians in 1948, like Haganah and Stern and Etzel and others. And the goal of these groups is to force people out of their communities. They burn houses, they burn cars. The army protects them, the army supports them. If Palestinians try to defend themselves, even with stones, the army comes in and starts shooting Palestinians. And the result is that we have lost more than 1,050 people since in the last 2 years. Almost 50 killed by the settlers, and the others are killed by the Israeli army. But the drastic matter is that 60 communities in the West Bank have been already evicted by settlers' terror in vital areas like Hebron and Jordan Valley. In addition to that, Israel spread more than 1,000 military checkpoints all over the West Bank and created no less than 200 military gates that transform many communities into small prisons. The 1,000 checkpoints plus the wall, which confiscated practically 16% of the West Bank, are cutting the West Bank into pieces of ghettos, and even Pantostan would not be a proper word because you're talking about very little areas, small ghettos. Each community is becoming a ghetto separated from the rest of the country. And on top of that, of course, Israel is confiscating land left and right. In the last 2 years, they've created no less than 69 new illegal settlements, which brings up the number of Israeli illegal settlements to 500, including 200 official settlements and 300 settlement outposts. What's happening is that Israel is annexing land illegally. They confiscated, in addition to the 16% that were confiscated by the wall, they confiscated more than 16 other percentage of the West Bank. So the whole of Area C is practically prohibited for Palestinians now, which is 62% of the West Bank. And Israel is dismantling all the authorities of the Palestinian Authority and dismantling the Oslo Agreement itself completely. From medical perspective, Gaza suffers from horrible still humanitarian and medical situation. According to the most recent report of World Health Organization, there are no less than 100,000 Palestinian children suffering from severe malnutrition. 37,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women are also suffering from severe malnutrition, which threatens the lives of their babies. In general, there's very bad shortage of everything. And because of lack of clean water and proper sanitation, because Israel destroyed the whole infrastructure of Gaza, including roads, there are no roads left in Gaza, by the way. I mean, not a single street in Gaza exists anymore. Everything was destroyed. Not to talk about more than 82% of every structure in Gaza, including houses, universities, hospitals, clinics, schools, everything. But in addition to all of that, and because of all of that, we don't have clean water. The result is spread of terrible infections and epidemics. We've been warning in medical relief recently about the risk of cholera and the risk of very serious diseases like meningitis. We already counted 73,000 cases of infectious hepatitis because of the lack of water. And in addition to that, people get gastrointestinal infections, respiratory infections. The last winter weathers destroyed lives. You have to consider that 1.6 million people live in tents. And I think more than 58,000 tents were blown away in the last weather conditions. And we've lost almost 20 people. Many of them are infants because of cold. Medical Relief, the organization that I lead and participated in founding 46 years ago, is a voluntary health organization that has done tremendous work and is doing tremendous work both in West Bank and Gaza. We have now 80 medical teams functioning in Gaza that never stopped working since the very first day of the war. And they treat about 200,000 Palestinians every month. They do wonderful work. Although the army destroyed, the Israeli army destroyed 11 of our main clinics and centers, we didn't stop working. Jabalia Clinic, for instance, in Jabalia camp was destroyed 3 times, and 3 times we rehabilitated it and made it function again, sometimes even with simple means. We've rented buildings, although it's very costly to reactivate many of the programs. And we provide not only medical care and medications to people, but and primary health care, but we care for people with chronic diseases, with cancer. We care for people. Sometimes we provide food. Frequently, we provide milk to children and so on. So the organization is doing the best it can inside Gaza. In the West Bank, we have many centers in the West Bank, by the way. In general, medical relief works in 600 communities out of 660 Palestinian communities in West. And in the West Bank, we provide we have now 21 mobile clinics that move around serving 200 communities threatened by settlers and trying to help people steadfast and remain in their communities. And this is tremendous work, actually. And we welcome any help or support to medical relief. People can look at our activities if they write pmrs.ps on internet, and they can get a lot of information. But in general, the people who are working there never stopped working for a moment, although some of them lost their beloved. We lost some of the people who were killed in the bombardment. But people are determined to continue to serve their people.
So, Dr. Mustafa, thank you for that, and for the reminder that, of course, in the face of this unbelievable, extraordinary genocide, and also the as you say, the settler terror and colonialism in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and elsewhere, that people like you and Palestinians in general are still, of course, living and persisting, and existing. So the question is, when you look at the so-called ceasefire that the Trump administration announced, to what extent do you feel that the attention that what you're describing, I mean, what you're describing effectively is a slowing down of the genocide, but just the continuation of it. It's making life miserable for Palestinians in Gaza. It's trying to make life untenable. As you said, there's not a road left in Gaza. The hospitals have been destroyed. Universities have been destroyed. Schools, everyone knows this at this point. But how do you make sense of the lack of attention since the ceasefire was announced? Wasn't that the whole point of that, to change the focus away from Gaza and away from Palestine more generally? And what do you have to say to how does that work into what you're saying?
Well, President Trump said it very clearly when he came to Israel and spoke at the Knesset, the Israeli Knesset. He said he came to save Israel from the international isolation. And he said Israel is isolated, and I will stop this isolation with this ceasefire agreement. So, of course, the United States did not only supply Israel with more than $40 billion of weapons and weapons of mass destruction, it also provides it with political support continuously. And in reality, now there is a wrong impression that there is ceasefire and that the genocidal war stopped. But let me remind everybody that the genocidal war is still going on. And second, what we've been subjected to is 3 war crimes at the same time, and the 3 of them are still continuing. The war crime of genocide, at a different scale, yes, in Gaza now, but it's still going on. Second, the war crime of ethnic cleansing, where 92% of people in Gaza have been ethnically, practically cleansed from their homes, from their towns, from their villages, and 60 communities in the West Bank as well. And the third war crime is the ongoing war crime of collective punishment, including starvation. And that is still going on. So practically the 3 war crimes are going on. We have 2 main forces of power that we rely on as Palestinians. The first one is our steadfastness on the ground, and the fact that Israel has failed, although for 2 years it has conducted these 3 war crimes, it failed to eradicate Palestinian resistance to injustice. It failed to impose capitulation on Palestinians. It failed to conduct the most important goal for them, which was ethnic cleansing of the population, especially of Gaza. So our steadfastness in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Jerusalem, inside 1948 areas is the main power we have. The second power is the international solidarity. And that international solidarity was very powerful and forceful, that it forced Mr. Trump to interfere and stop Israel, the large-scale genocide. But at the same time, it's still going on. And that's why it's very important for your audience, for the people of the world, to know what's still going on and to know that we need this solidarity, not only to stop all forms of aggressions on Palestinians today, but because we need this solidarity to achieve our freedom, to achieve our independence, to achieve our survival from this terrible settler colonial system that we are subjected to. In reality, what became clear during this terrible war of genocide is that what we face here is not only occupation and not only a system of apartheid, the worst apartheid system in human history. I mean, much worse than what prevailed in South Africa. Not only a system of discrimination. What we face here is a settler colonial project that aims at evicting us completely from our homeland. And that's why we need international solidarity to stop all this injustice, to allow Palestinians to finally be free. Let me give you an example of how collective punishment works in the West Bank. For instance, I was the day before yesterday, I was in Jericho, and we were holding seminars there and discussions and so on. And suddenly we were told that the roads were closed to Jericho. The whole of Jericho became a prison. Nobody is allowed in, nobody is allowed out. Thousands of people were stuck. And then we discovered that this whole thing happened because one Israeli soldier decided to go and shop in Jericho, because the prices there are lower than in Israel. And he came to Jericho and dressed in civilian clothing. Nobody knew him, of course. And then the Israeli army took notice of his disappearance and closed Jericho. Punished us, punished everybody in Jericho and outside Jericho who wants to get there. Till the Palestinian security found that guy and gave him back to the Israelis. I mean, look at the logic. The logic is that everything is against us. When a settler decides to come and invade a Palestinian village, or to kill Palestinian sheep, or to destroy a house, the army comes in and shoots us. And so the level of collective punishment, the level of this discriminatory system is beyond description. We used to organize, I used to lead many nonviolent actions. We used to use nonviolence as a form of resistance and struggle. I was injured 9 times during these demonstrations, but still we were shot with tear gas bombs, with live ammunition, very rarely with live ammunitions, although I got 2 of them in one case while I was treating an injured person. But now you can't even demonstrate. If you start even moving in the direction of the demonstration, they immediately shoot and kill you. So the level of oppression that we face, look at what's happening to Palestinian prisoners. That is one single case of how torture is practiced. There is about 10,000 prisoners now in Israeli jails, including leaders like Marwan Barghouti and Ahmad Saadat and others. They are all subjected to starvation, they're subjected to beating, they're subjected to torture. We lost up to now 112 of these prisoners who died under torture or because of prevention of medical care. Some of them were only 24 and 26 years old. So where are human rights? The Red Cross itself is not allowed even to visit any of the prisoners. And many of them you can easily call captives. Because when you put 400 children in these jails, you are practically making them captives. Or when you have 3,650 people in Israeli jails without charges, without even them knowing why they are in jail. Their lawyers don't know because there are no charges under the so-called administrative detention. And that's why we started a campaign of Red Ribbon to demand people, we started a campaign of Red Ribbon to remind people that there are 10,000 Palestinian captives in Israeli jails.
You mean red ribbons?
Red
like
ribbons.
A ribbon?
Okay, yes.
Red ribbons.
Yeah.
Could I ask Dr. Mustafa that you're describing something, and I know Karim has a question, but you're describing, we're in 2025. We're almost at 2026. It's so unbelievable to me as a historian to listen to you describe what are policies right out of the 19th century, you said it's worse than apartheid South Africa. It's so anachronistic is the word that historians would use. It's so out of time what the Israelis are doing. So the question is, why are they escalating in this extraordinarily vicious, open way? I mean, I know you've lived with this for decades and decades, but why are they escalating? So why are they so unrestrained in the viciousness and the racism and the oppression and the savagery and the genocide, of course? How do you explain this? Is it that they are desperate or they feel they're about to win?
It's a combination. And if I summarize, I would say 3 reasons. First reason, the settler colonial project thinks that it is at a stage where it has to be decisive. They are so worried about the fact that after 77 years or 70, almost 8 years of ethnic cleansing in 1948, when they displaced 70% of the Palestinian population, even after 78 years of that, and after 58 years of the occupation of West Bank and Gaza, and again displacing hundreds of thousands of people, After all of that, our numbers now in Palestine are 7.3 million Palestinians versus 7.1 million or 7.2 million Jewish Israelis, which means the Zionist movement has failed in achieving its goal. It cannot succeed without not only taking over the land, but also emptying the land, evicting the people, conducting ethnic cleansing. And that is the thing that worries them so much. That's why you see them so vicious now in building settlements and in trying to put us under the most difficult conditions, thinking that this would force us out of our country. And they think they are in a decisive stage where they have to win this war that is going on for 100 years. That's the first reason. The second reason that people don't pay attention to is that what you see in Israel is not only the rise of extreme racist, religious, fanatic ideology, but also the rise of fascism. Smotrich calls himself a fascist homophobe. People like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich they come from a movement that was classified by Israel itself as a terrorist movement. And now they took over the government, and Netanyahu is not less fascist than them. But what worries me mostly is the number of people who tend to fascism in the Israeli society itself. I'm sorry to say that, and I don't mean to compare, but in reality, this phenomena of movement towards fascism in Israel is unprecedented since the rise of fascism in Germany. And that is very worrying because it destroys even any potential or opportunity for coexistence by what they are doing. But the third factor is simple. It's the lack of response from the so-called international community. Those who claim they believe in human rights and international law and international humanitarian law, they used to come and teach us about that, and we believed them. And they taught us about nonviolence and democracy and all of that, and we believed them. We feel betrayed because they abandoned all these principles when it came to Israel. And that is the main reason why Israel dares to do all these crimes and continues to do all these crimes. For instance, take European countries and those countries who recognized Palestine, and they keep talking about two-state solution in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Whenever something happens, they repeat two-state solution. Fine. But because they are not imposing a single sanction on Israel, they are allowing Israel to continue the assassination of any potential for the so-called Palestinian state or Palestinian or two-state solution. They are responsible because they did not apply any sanctions on Israel, any punitive acts. And the level of double standard, when you compare what's happening in the case of Ukraine and Russia, and that's what's happening here, is really shocking. The other day, I was hearing, I think, Callas, who's the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, or the Commissioner, as they call her, saying that in the case of Ukraine and Russia, we cannot speak about equal sides. There is an aggressor and a victim. Excuse me, what about Israel and Palestine? And why, in the case of Ukraine and Russia, they imposed more than 11,000 sanctions in Russia in less than 2 months, and not a single sanction on Israel? What we face in Palestine, and I hope I can make myself clear here, what we face in Palestine is not an issue of tragedy for Palestinians only. It's a tragedy for international law. What we see here is the death of international law and international humanitarian law. It means that this world is run by force. Whoever has the power can do whatever they like. And that's why all the peoples of the world must understand that they should be in solidarity with Palestine, not because they are caring about the injustice in Palestine, but because also they are in solidarity with themselves. Because what's happening to us could happen to people in Nicaragua, and in Brazil, in Australia, anywhere. The idea here is that the whole international order based on international law and international humanitarian law is vanishing. And that's the most drastic development since Second World War.
Uh, Mustafa, I want to ask you, you've covered so much and it's really very fascinating. I want to go back to the question of steadfastness, which you elaborated on, and is the thing that really we relate to the most in terms of when we think about Palestinian people, you think of steadfastness, but also resistance. And I want to ask, in this face of this kind of ethnic cleansing and genocidal campaign that you've talked about, both in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem and other areas, the question is now, when you talk about ethnic cleansing and we're saying there's a process of ethnic cleansing, how long can such steadfastness continue? I mean, where does this, how does this go? I mean, if we're saying now that part of the so-called solution in Gaza is to disarm Hamas, is to kind of create a disarmed Hamas, where they're talking about a board of peace, the UN Security Council resolution, and it calls for this board of peace, and sort of with Trump, and at one point Tony Blair, I think he's no longer there, but sort of Tony Blair and these kinds of colonials and neo-colonials kind of coming in to govern Gaza. Presumably that might extend eventually to the West Bank. So you have this sense of ethnic cleansing, but also a return to this neo-colonial ways of trying to govern Palestine and Palestinians. But at the same time, we always talk about resistance and we talk about steadfastness. How do we, how do we think about these two issues today, and how can steadfastness continue in the face of not just this unbelievable facts on the ground in the West Bank and in Gaza, but also, as you're saying, this kind of American and Western governmental support and all the big companies that have been documented, the big companies, the arms dealers, the AI people, all these kinds of people, Palantir. How can one remain steadfast over a longer period of time? I wonder how we can think about this and not be defeatist. I mean, we don't want to be defeatist here, and so the question is, how can one keep on doing this? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, the starting point is that the United States of America and Israel, the first place, behave as if they have defeated us. And because we were defeated, they have to impose on us everything. We were not defeated. We're struggling. We continue to struggle everywhere. The whole Palestinian people are struggling for their freedom, and we never gave up. The idea, you don't get defeated till you capitulate. I don't need to go back into theories of war by von Klaus, by many who spoke about that. But it's about the will. France was defeated in the military war, but didn't capitulate, or at least part of it didn't capitulate, and eventually managed to free their country. From military perspective, Vietnam was defeated by military force, but it never capitulated, and eventually it won. And in that sense, we have not been defeated. We are there. As long as we are staying in our country and trying to achieve our freedom, we're not defeated. So yes, the price we paid is beyond description. When you talk about 250,000 people in Gaza killed or injured, I'd like to mention that. I want your audience need to understand it. It's more than 12% of the population. You know what is 12%? Apply it to the United States of America, and you would be talking about at least 35 million people killed or injured. Can you imagine what the United States would have done if 1 million, not 35 million, were killed or injured? I mean, look what they did after the 11th of September. You remember, 4,500 innocent people were killed, and then the result was wars all over the world. In our case, we lost what is equal to 35 million Americans. That's a horrible number. If that has happened in India, you would be talking about 176 million people killed or injured. It's horrifying. And then look, they throw on Gaza 200,000 tons of explosives. That is about 86 kilograms for each man, woman, and child. That is equal to 10 nuclear bombs, similar to those that were thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And now they left us with 60 million tons of rubble mixed with weapons, mixed with with explosives that didn't explode, mixed with depleted uranium and horrible chemical materials. So many people will get cancer because of that. Yet we didn't leave. Yet we are here. Yet we are steadfast because we know if we leave, we will never be allowed to come back. People learned from 1948, from the experience of that terrible Nakba that happened. And so we are not defeated. Now, about the arrangements for Gaza, of course, we don't accept what they are trying to impose on us. First of all, Rafah crossing must be opened in both directions. There are 100,000 people I know in Egypt who wait impatiently to come back to Gaza because they know that their dignity near their destroyed house is preserved more than when they are in another place, unable to teach their children, unable to get medical care, unable to be treated with dignity. Second, they are speaking about bringing foreigners to rule us. For God's sake, they couldn't think of somebody better than Tony Blair, this corrupt person who has a horrible history, as you know, who is a liar, who lied to his own people in Britain and lied to the world about the weapons of mass destruction and never really apologized for that. We don't need him. We don't need any other foreigner to rule us. We've agreed with the Egyptians and with different political forces that a group of people could run Gaza, from those who remained in Gaza, regardless of all this destruction. And that's why I don't think we should ever accept a foreign rule of Gaza. Adding another colonialism to the colonialism we suffer from. We didn't struggle for 100 years to get another colonialism in Gaza. And third, regarding the stabilizing force, as they call it, our opinion is clear. And by the way, it is supported by the mediators, by Egypt, by Qatar, by Turkey, by many others, and many other foreign countries like Norway and Spain. The stabilizing force should be a peacekeeping force, a force that sustains ceasefire, and it should go inside the area that Israel is still occupying to get the Israeli army out of Gaza. So these three issues are issues of struggle. We are demanding something. They are trying to impose another thing. Nothing is decided yet. And be careful that Netanyahu doesn't want even to move into the second stage, because he wants to keep the war on. He wants to initiate the war again in Lebanon. He keeps bombarding Syria.
Dr. Mustafa, why do you think he will? I mean, since he hasn't moved exactly as you said in Lebanon, there's the same sort of so-called ceasefire applies in Lebanon, where the Israelis keep bombing. The same is happening in Gaza, obviously, the same in the West Bank, and so on. What is going to get Netanyahu or any Israeli to move on to the so-called second stage? Do you feel really?
The most important thing is to reactivate the international solidarity movement and to activate it in the strongest possible way. And not only that, but this solidarity movement should transform also more and more in the direction of boycott, divestment, sanctions. The only way to translate solidarity activities into a material power is to enhance the boycott, divestment, sanctions. And I am optimistic about that. I think the world is ready. The change in people's minds, especially young people, including in the United States, including among 40% of the young Jewish people, the change that happened in their mind about understanding the Palestinian plight and our need for freedom is irreversible, I hope. And that's why I think activists all over the world must enhance their activities now to increase more the international solidarity movement. Our steadfastness with that solidarity can change the formula.
Mustafa, actually, on that specific point, I mean, you just referred to it in passing, but I'm sure you've seen the same statistics we have that show that in the US, for example, which I think is the heart of this whole problem, support for Palestinians is actually a majority of Americans have more sympathy with Palestinians than they do with Israel, which is unprecedented in all of these years of our struggle with the Zionist project in Palestine. So that's a huge change. And it's true that the genocide in Gaza helped accelerate that, but that was actually a tendency that was in place even before the genocide took place. But now, of course, to go back to what you're saying at the very beginning of this conversation, with this so-called ceasefire, which isn't, as you've said, isn't a ceasefire because the Israelis have violated it hundreds of times and killed hundreds of people and go on demolishing and go on, they go on, basically it's continuing. It's slower, but it's continuing as it has been from before. So the risk here is that people will start to think, okay, well, khalas, now there's a ceasefire, so it's okay, and we'll be distracted. We all know that mainstream press organizations have basically dropped their coverage, whatever it was, of Gaza. So there is a danger here, which I think we need to pay attention to. So I guess the question I have for you is, yes, of course, Palestinian sumud, steadfastness is very, very important. Yes, of course, international activists are very important, but also, what do you think can be done from Palestine, in particular from the Palestinian leadership, to engage international solidarity, to engage the BDS movement internationally, to say, this is the time, as you just did, but not just you as an individual, the leadership, Palestinian political society as well as Palestinian civil society, to appeal for international intervention, not by the likes of Trump and Blair, but rather, as you're saying, by international civil society activists and ordinary people around the world who can commit to pushing boycott through to liberation, basically. What do you think could be done from our side politically and institutionally, not just individually?
Well, I think the voice of Palestine, you can hear it very well from the people. You can hear it from the voice of many Palestinian leaders. The Palestinian Authority itself is under unprecedented pressure. And instead of sending messages to the world about the need for solidarity, they are engaging now in changing our curricula under the pressure and suspending the salaries of prisoners and families of martyrs and etc. And because of international pressure on them. But the worst thing is that they've tried to impose now a law which says that you cannot participate in local elections, and probably they will apply that later to any other elections, unless you sign a political paper supporting their political line, including Oslo Agreement, which Israel is destroying every day. It's amazing. So that is, of course, that represents an internal dilemma for us, but we will deal with it. And there is a strong popular movement against these actions. And again, here, in reality, what's happening to the authority and to the people in Palestine is that the victims are being punished instead of punishing the aggressor. Let me go back to your main question. How to sustain this movement and how to increase it? I think I totally agree with you that, all the figures are very clear. 82% of young Democrats support Palestine, 40% of young Jewish people do the same, etc. You have wonderful phenomena like the election of Mamdani in New York. The idea here is that the power of solidarity, which is strong now in the United States, has to translate into actions with Congress people, with senators, with electing people like Mamdani to important positions. And most importantly, what is the power of the Israeli Zionist lobby? What is the main thing that gives them so much power? It's not the money. It's not their numbers. It's the organization. And our solidarity movement is not as organized as they are organized. And in my opinion, the key point here, especially for the younger generation, is to get organized in a very good way. And that organization itself will translate this solidarity feeling into a power that can make a bigger difference. Of course, when I speak about our strategy as Palestinians, the strategy we believe in the Palestinian National Initiative since it was initiated, and so since when we started this movement, we started it because we all opposed Oslo and its horrible clues. I mean, with Edward Said and Haidar Abd Shafi and also Ibrahim Daqqaq and others. The strategy we believe in is that we have to change the balance of power between us and the Israeli Zionist and now fascist movement. And that can happen through 6 pillars of struggle. First, steadfastness, for sure. It's the most important factor now. Second, resisting injustice in all forms that international law allows. Third, establishing unity and a unified Palestinian leadership of the struggle. Fourth, reunifying the Palestinian powers in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Jerusalem, and in the 1948 area, and in the diaspora. Unifying all these efforts together. And fifth, the greatest possible international solidarity movement and boycott, divestment, sanctions. And sixth, it's penetrating the circles of those who support Israel. I think we've achieved some of that in various areas. I mean, look at Spain, look at Ireland, look at Slovenia. There are changes that are happening. And I think when I speak about steadfastness, is not isolated from the 5 other pillars of struggle that we believe in.
Mustafa, I want to come back to one of these pillars, which I think, I would like to just focus on for a few minutes, which is the question, and I know that you personally and the Mubadala itself as a whole has been working on very, very strongly, which is the question of unification of the Palestinian factions, of the parties. And especially now, I mean, this has been very important for the past 2-3 decades, but now, especially in light of the genocide and this ethnic cleansing campaign, it's more important than ever to try to have a Palestinian or some form of consensus among Palestinian parties and leaders, such as yourself, to try to have an actual negotiating position, to have a position that can say to the other Arab countries, to the mediators, to the Americans, to the Israelis, no, there is something that all of us come to, and the kind of Zionist imperative to always wanted to divide, to fragment within Palestine, among Palestinians. This has to be met with this mythical, we've been talking about for a long time, this mythical thing of Palestinian unification, which seems to get farther and farther and farther away. I know that there was this Beijing declaration that I think you authored or co-authored. Can you talk a little bit about this and actually not in terms of declarations, but on the ground, is this a realistic thing that we can look to, or is this just, I mean, let's face it, political slogans that we can applaud, but really there's no basis on the ground for what's going on. I mean, when we look at the role of Mahmoud Abbas and the PA and others, it's dispiriting. So how should we think about this?
Let me go back to first of all, you are right. The Palestinian National Initiative was the most active power in Palestine that tries to get unity. We mediated between Fatah and Hamas several times. We were the mediators between them when we created the only national unity government in the history of Palestine. And that was the only government, the unified government, that I personally accepted to be a minister in. Otherwise, I would not be part of any government that is not unifying Palestinians. But unfortunately, that unity government was besieged, and it lasted only 86 days. The Beijing Declaration was a way out of this situation we face, and we signed it during the war. I personally wrote it, drafted it, let's be say, in the presence of all the parties. And everybody signed it. Hamas signed it, Fatah signed it, all the other Palestinian groups signed it. And in my opinion, it was the best scenario for getting out of this dilemma we are living in. It spoke about establishing a non-factional, independent government for both West Bank and Gaza that would be transitional. And that will be for both West Bank and Gaza, and would prepare within a year or 2 years for free democratic elections. And the agreement spoke about establishing this government and also creating a unified leadership. And although Fatah signed it, the deputy head of Fatah, Mr. Alul, signed it. When we came back, the PA refused to implement it and was never implemented. And in my opinion, the PA shot itself in the foot because they didn't implement it. Because now Netanyahu says he will not allow them into Gaza. And he will not allow any role of the Palestinian Authority. He's not only attacking Hamas, he's attacking them as well. So they made a huge mistake. And if there is a sense of duty or a sense of responsibility, I think they would immediately implement it. But there are no signs of that, the opposite. Now, that doesn't kill the idea of the need for Palestinian unity. Maybe, and this is the first time I would say that, maybe what we need now is to adjust and say what we are calling for is not unity between everybody and everybody, but unity of all Palestinian forces and groups and civil society structures that struggle for liberation. Unity of international liberation movement. Anybody who doesn't want to be in the liberation movement does not have the right to be in this unity.
But Mustafa, sorry, can I interrupt? Lando, for example, from what I read, and please correct me, the PA, Mahmoud, the PA, let's say, has just proposed a new electoral law that's going to exclude Hamas. Unless I misunderstood that? Yeah.
That's how some Western governments present it, but it's not true. I refer to it. The new law they impose, which we are struggling against now, is a law that says that you cannot run in municipality elections and later, of course, for parliament or for presidency or for national council, unless you sign a paper in which you say you are committed to the commitments of the PLO and to international legitimacy. Now, PLO commitments means security coordination with Israel. It means the Oslo Agreement, which we all reject. It means commitments that Israel is not respecting. So why should we imprison ourselves in such a cage when the other side is not respecting any? But more dangerously, let's talk about international legitimacy. What does that mean? Who decides legitimacy? Is it Mr. Trump or Netanyahu or whoever? I said frequently, no, if you want something, you could say people should respect international law, UN resolutions and international humanitarian law. That's fine, it's a good formula. But to impose on Palestinians these restrictions, it's totally unacceptable. Already, the Palestinian civil society, including Pingu and other structures, have rejected this law and called for boycott of elections if they take place according to this law. And 5 Palestinian groups who are members of the PLO, including Mubadara, PFLP, TFLP, People's Party, and FIDA, have rejected the law and declared that they will boycott elections if it happens. So it's not about Hamas. It's about freedom and democracy. It's about democratic rights. And it is presented as if it's to dismiss Hamas, but in reality, it is to dismiss any opposition to this Palestinian Authority. And I think now there is a turmoil all over the country about prisoners' rights and about this law. And I hope we can stop it, because if it is allowed to pass, that means the destruction of the Palestinian political system. That's exactly what those who think they defeated Palestinians want to achieve. This is one form of capitulation to the pressure of the aggressors.
Mustafa, can I ask just on this specific point, yani the question of because this is to refer to something you mentioned in passing a few minutes ago too, to reconstitute the ways in which Palestinians can communicate, not just in the West Bank, but between the West Bank, Gaza, 48, exile, and so on. What about the PLO, and what do you think about the possibility of reforming? People have talked about this a lot for many years. Reforming the PLO so that it can play exactly the role that it used to play back in the 60s and 70s, before Oslo, in fact. So going back to that idea of the PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people that can bridge the gaps between the West Bank, as you know, West Bank, Jerusalem, Gaza, 48, exile, and so forth, because we do need some kind of supranational body that can connect all the different constituencies of the Palestinian people. So do you think there's hope or potential or a role for the PLO as the organization that binds the people together in one collective, under one collective umbrella, or the PNC for that matter too?
When it comes to the Palestinian Authority and the leadership of the PLO now, the existing leadership, we and so many others are perceived as democratic opposition forces. We are in the PLO. We are members of the PLO. We're loyal to the PLO, but we are not in the leadership of the PLO. We are excluded. We are even excluded from the commission they created to write a new constitution. We care about the PLO. Nobody from the opposition is talking about replacing the PLO or creating a parallel structure to the PLO. But the PLO cannot be reformed without democratic free elections of its bodies. All these talks and agreements didn't work. We've spent the last 25 years meeting in different capitals of the world. We've been to Cairo so many times. We've been to Alamein. We've been to Algeria. We've been to Russia, to Moscow. We've been to Beijing. I mean, we still have to go to Tokyo, I think. And nothing happened. Because the basic principle of real reform can only happen if people like yourselves, Palestinians in the diaspora, would choose their representatives to the Palestinian National Council. And if we in the occupied territories have the right also to choose our representatives, and we didn't have elections in 20 years. The president was elected for 4 years, not for 20 years. The parliament was elected for 4 years, not for 20 years, and it was dissolved by the president also illegally in 2018. So practically, we have no elections, we have no representative bodies, we have no separation of powers, we have no independent judiciary system. It's a horrible situation. It can only be fixed and reformed through free democratic elections, and with just laws, not with laws that exclude most of the people from the right to participate in the elections. I think the PLO leadership, existing leadership, understands that if elections happens, there will be a very clear change because people want change, and they try to avoid that by restricting participation in elections. Now, let me go back to the issue of division. Why did we have political division in Palestine? It's two reasons. One of the reason of the division was because of the difference about the political program. Some people supported Oslo, others rejected Oslo. Some people believed that in the illusion that the Israeli establishment is ready for a compromise with Palestinians, and life has shown that this was an illusion. Some people believe that the United States can be the mediator between the two sides. And again, it was clear that the United States, even itself, it admits itself that it is biased to Israel. It's not going to be neutral between us and them. So all this difference about the strategy, about the political line is over. Because now it's clear that Oslo failed, and it's clear that that line has failed drastically. So there is no objective reason for the internal political division. The second reason for the internal political division was the fight over the authority, mainly between Hamas and Fatah. But now we don't have any authority anymore. In Gaza is under occupation, and West Bank is under occupation, and practically any authority that exists is an authority under occupation. So there is no justification for this fight over an authority that is under occupation. That's why objectively, Palestinians now have to understand that we still are not in the stage of having a state, but in the stage of liberation struggle. Liberation struggle for our freedom, for ending occupation, for ending the apartheid system, for ending settlements, etc., etc. So since we are in a liberation movement, what we need is now the unity of liberation movements.
But Mustafa, that's why I asked about the PLO and actually the Palestine National Council too. Because, I mean, you're talking about elections, but elections, I mean, as you just finished saying, elections in the occupied territories under the conditions that the Israelis have imposed, we all know, you explained why that's not going to work. But what about elections or democratic representation for Palestinians who live, I mean, after all, the single biggest group of Palestinians is still those in exile, refugees, and so forth. Who,
yes,
if I
and
remember
that's why
right,
you have to get organized. I mean, let the Palestinians in the United States say to the PA and to the PLO leadership, we are the ones who will elect our representatives, and we're going to do that. Do it electronically if you have to. That's why people in Chile should do the same. No, but you see what we miss is that we cannot liberate our brains. We cannot liberate our thinking from the constraints that were imposed on us. And here in the occupied territories, we keep talking about our right. I know we cannot have elections tomorrow, but we could have a preparation for elections. But you can't prepare for elections by imposing a law that excludes 90% of the Palestinian people from the right, or political forces from the right to participate in elections. It's not about whether it's possible or not. It's about agreeing that strategically the leadership has to be elected by the people and not imposed on them. The Central Council, for instance, of the PLO was 111 members elected by the Palestinian National Council. They now made it 240 or more. Who appointed these people? Nobody knows. So clearly, there is a process not of reform. There's a process of deformation rather than reform in the PLO.
So, Dr. Mustafa, just to follow up on that, the point you made, the broader point you've been making, which is the question of international solidarity as one of the bright spots, in a sense, from the past two years, and in fact building on decades of work. What is how do you feel about Arab and Islamic solidarity over the past 2 years? What is your frank assessment of that? Given that that is, especially the Arab part, is the most sort of, in a sense, the closest form of solidarity to the Palestinians.
Tama, do you mean people or do you mean the countries?
Both. Let Mustafa answer as he wishes.
Yeah.
People or states, as Mustafa wants to answer. But the broader question of solidarity, Arab and Islamic solidarity, what's your understanding of that and the role that those are going to play in the liberation struggle?
First of all, we are absolutely thankful to all Arab peoples and Muslim peoples and Christian people who are in solidarity with Palestinians. There is no problem with the peoples of the Arab world. They are all with Palestine. But we all know what kind of political structures exist. And if it was up to the people, there would be no problem. We will see all the Arab countries boycotting Israel immediately. You will see elimination immediately of all normalization agreements, including the so-called Abraham agreements, because that's the will of the Arab peoples. But unfortunately, that will does not translate into decisions or actions by government, because the governments are pressured by other factors. Until we have full democracy in each country, until we have a situation where the decision is made according to people's will, you will continue to see the situation we have. Of course, we are not happy with the level of solidarity. I proposed in the very first days of the war that the Arab and Muslim countries, the 53 Arab and Muslim countries, should have formed a humanitarian force at least to go and break the siege on Gaza. And I think have they done that, they would have succeeded really. But unfortunately, this never happened. So we were not calling for the Arab governments to send armies to fight Israel. We are realistic about the impossibility of that. But at least that action should have happened. At the end, there was positive role from Arab and Muslim governments when they met with, when they pressured Trump, basically, to achieve the ceasefire. And now they support our opinion regarding the ruling of Gaza and the kind of stabilization force that they are talking about and about Rafah crossing. I hope they stick to that. But if you want my frank opinion, I think every Arab country and every Muslim country should immediately boycott Israel and impose sanctions. They should be leading that. That would be a translation of true solidarity with Palestinians, especially in the light of the crimes that Israel continues to commit. And they would be doing that to achieve peace, real peace, just peace, a true peace, not an Israeli imposition. And they should be doing that in solidarity with themselves, because not only with Palestinians, because look at what Israel is doing in Lebanon, look at what it's doing in Syria. When Netanyahu was asked, and please show the map when you broadcast the podcast, maybe you can show it. When Netanyahu was asked about whether he accepts or supports the idea of Greater Israel, he said yes. What is Greater Israel? Greater Israel means that it should include not only the West Bank and Gaza and the Golan, the Syrian Golan Heights, but all of Lebanon, all of Jordan, all of Palestine, 2/3 of Syria, half of Iraq, half of Saudi Arabia, and half of Egypt. He said he agrees with that map. This map is on the shoulders of many Israeli soldiers in Gaza, the map of Greater Israel. And now, if Israel is not occupying Jordan, it is imposing itself on Jordan. It is imposing itself on the surrounding, trying to be the imperial power that rules the area. That's the risk that everybody should be aware of. And it's a threat to their economy, to their political systems, to their security itself. And that's why I think, unfortunately, the Arab and Muslim solidarity has been much weaker than what we anticipated or wished for.
Dr. Mustafa, thank you. You've been very generous with your time, and thank you for reminding us, about and just emphasizing the question of Palestinian steadfastness and the importance of international solidarity in the Arab world and in the West and other parts in the global South, of course. These two things are so crucial to push towards Palestinian liberation, and they need to work in tandem, of course. So thank you very much, and thank you, of course, for your work, for your amazing work. And we'll also put the links to the Palestinian Medical Society and the initiative as well on the website that we're going to be broadcasting here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. May I just say one last word? This is a message to all Palestinians in the diaspora, wherever they live. You can participate in our struggle. When I say support, for instance, this campaign of freeing the Palestinian captives in Israeli jails, that's one activity. Second, I'm calling on all of you to help the steadfastness of the people. And I know some people will complain about Palestinian Authority and about corruption here and there. Okay, don't just go Palestinian to Palestinian. You can support a single Palestinian family. You can support a Palestinian orphan in Gaza. We can help you if you need help. We're ready to do that. In my opinion, what we need is a Palestinian to Palestinian, a Palestinian home outside, which can afford help to others, to support a Palestinian home in Gaza to rebuild itself. I think that's what we need. Recreating Palestinian internal solidarity between Palestinians everywhere, not waiting for any official structure. Let's just do it as a popular grassroots movement.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank
Fantastic.
you,
Thank
Dr.
you so
Mustafa.
much,
Shukran
Dr.
jazilan.
Mustafa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Afwan,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Shukran lak. Okay, guys, I thought that was an incredibly interesting discussion with Mustafa Barghouti, who really is a very prominent voice. He appears everywhere, and he is involved in a lot of the negotiations between and among the Palestinian parties themselves, but also on the international stage. So what he's saying, it's not just a sort of a regular voice. It's somebody that has I think quite an impact in the negotiations and the Palestinian polity. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I thought he was. I thought he was very articulate. I think he was obviously. He's a caliber of a Palestinian politician whom we don't typically get on this kind of show, and I think it's important for us to listen to see what somebody in the West Bank on the ground in Palestine is actually seeing, experiencing. His whole take. What's very interesting is that on the one hand he was recounting the extraordinary viciousness and it's just the Orwellian nature of what's happening in terms of Gaza, in terms of the West Bank, in terms of the levels of settler colonization, the brutality, the viciousness, the nakedness of what they're doing to Palestinians, what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians on the one hand. On the other hand, he made 2 points, and Sadi, I'd love to get your take on this. He made 2 points that are really interesting. One is the persistence of Palestinian sumud or steadfastness. And didn't he say several times, we have not been defeated,
Yes.
Which I think is a really crucial point. On the other hand, he also spoke about the need for increased solidarity, international solidarity, and there is a shift taking place, but the shift of sympathy versus translating sympathy and solidarity to actual political sort of transformation on the ground. These are two different things. So Sadi, what do you think of his take, especially his point that we have not been defeated despite the horrors that we've all witnessed and that, of course, those on the ground in Palestine are experiencing firsthand?
I mean, we've been saying that all along, that there's a distinction that the Israelis cannot seem to get into their heads between inflicting harm on the one hand and achieving a political objective on the other. They're not the same thing. So they've achieved an incalculable, infliction of harm on not obviously above all the Palestinians in Gaza, but also, as he was saying, the West Bank, those in 48, those in exile, and so forth. That's what they specialize in. They are the world masters.
Straight out of the 19th century.
Not out of the 12th century, not even the 19th century. I mean, they aspire to 19th century. These people they're retro. There's a kind of, we've talked about this before. There's a kind of retrograde component to Zionism, the cruelty that it expresses. It's not even 19th century colonialism. It's much older.
Combined with fascism, as he mentioned quite a few times.
Yeah, it's the worst. It's the worst of all worlds, basically. But anyway, and with 21st century weapons too. So, but the point is that their ability to inflict harm does not translate into the attainment of political objectives. If their political objective is just simply making people miserable, well then they've achieved. But that's not really what they're after. As he is saying, and as we know, what they're after is the removal of Palestinians from Palestine. They have not been able to do. They're making life. It's hell. It's hell on earth right now. It has been. It's been miserably. Everybody's miserable. That stark reminder at the very beginning of the discussion. 2 million Palestinians, 2.2 million Palestinians, minus unfortunately all the people who were killed, of course. So 2.1 whatever million Palestinians living now. 90% of them in tents, and thousands of tents got blown away in the recent storm and so forth. So there's an entire population now that's basically rendered homeless, living outdoors in the winter, and without school, without roads, without water, without anything, basically. Okay, so that's what the Israelis have done. Bravo. Wow. What have you accomplished other than making people miserable? What else have you done? They're still there. You haven't gotten
They've
rid of
revealed
them.
themselves, revealed the state, the
Of
nature of,
course,
of, of
of
what the
course, but
project
that's
is.
of course that's not what they wanted to do, because that I mean, unless they're even dumber than I thought that they are. But I mean, that's the accomplishment of a political objective. So
But okay,
they seem, there's something in their primitivism. There's something that they cannot seem to just, like when you look at Ben Gvir and Smotrich and these people, they cannot distinguish between the infliction of harm. They can't distinguish the infliction of harm from a political objective. For them, the infliction of harm is a political objective. I mean, we're talking about malice here. That
but Sadi,
really,
don't, I mean,
yeah.
and Karim, I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, I don't know if it's primitive, Sadi. I just think it's, as you said, I think it's more just unbelievable arrogance and an impunity. And gets me to the point, Karim, when Mustafa talks about international law is on the line. Remember, he said this, and we've said this on the show many times. We've had so many people on our show speaking about international law and the sort of the end of international law in Gaza. So, in that sense, how can we say that? I mean, how do we respond to those who would say to us that Israel hasn't won insofar as international law has been trampled underfoot? I mean, the whole thing of the UN adopting the Trump plan, this sort of the peace board, whatever the hell it's called, about Gaza. I mean, how can you tell me, Karim, that that's not a huge shift backwards from where we were, decades ago with the UN? Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to explain. It's more. It is.
I mean,
It's a Security Council, so it's not the UN. It's the UN Security Council. But that's an important distinction, because that you're talking about
security.
It's
Yeah.
the one body where there is a veto power and where there's a superpower that's able to express itself in this kind of way. And the reason this Security Council resolution was endorsed was because, as we talked about, the Arab states and the Muslim states went along with it, and so therefore China, especially, abstained, etc. So there was not. So that opposition was removed because some of the Arab and the Muslim states said yes, they endorsed it, and their whole thing. And I've heard this several times, and I've heard this from several different sources. The idea is to say, well, the Saudis in particular, but also the Qataris and the Turks and others, were able to move the zero draft, let's say, of this resolution into something where there was a lot more given, and the idea of Palestinian involvement, etc., or at least the space there, is increased, and so therefore there is this opportunity. And so people like Mustafa Barghouti talk about wanting to assert that we don't want colonials, we want to have an independent Palestinian body. If you look deep within this resolution and within things, you could find a paragraph or a sentence or somewhere in this thing that you can interpret that. So the question then becomes, push it on the ground, and you start this with the idea of Palestinian unity. If you don't have Palestinian unity, if the PA and if Mahmoud Abbas and all those kinds of people are still trying to come up, as Mustafa talked about, is still trying to come up with electoral laws written by the Americans and the Israelis to say, to not just exclude Hamas, which I think is the main thing really, but all the other groups that don't go along with the orthodoxy in this, then the whole point of that is to destroy the unity, and then sustain the fragmentation, not just territorially, but also politically in that sense. And so the antidote to that is to keep fighting against that, whether it's at the UN or on the ground. I think this is what unifies those two levels. But what I would say, so just on that, but just one point that Sadie was talking about, and you, Osama, yes, there's the sheer, I mean, the word evil is overused, but this kind of thing of Ben Gvir and people like this, and at the same time, but there's also the opportunity. I think they sense this opportunity, which is quite, it is an opportunity today for this genocidal, ethnic cleansing ideology from day one to. They know it's open now. It may not be open a year from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. And what I find most fascinating with what Mustafa was saying, and I think we've talked about it previously, is the fact, and Sari alluded to it, that the Israelis have not succeeded so far. In any case, in other words, the steadfastness, the resistance, and it's not just steadfastness, but the resistance as well, and international solidarity, especially in Western countries, has mitigated, or at least slowed down this process. The Israelis have not been able to do everything they wanted, and the political objective was ethnically cleansing. That was the political and the military objective, not just to make people miserable. So far, that hasn't happened. Doesn't mean they're not going to continue. Doesn't mean they won't find other opportunities or other excuses. Doesn't mean they're not going to push in the West Bank to try to do this there. And same thing in Lebanon.
Well, they have. I mean, but can you explain something to me? I mean, they have. I mean, Mustafa said two different things, and Seti, maybe you want to jump in here if you know more than me on this. But he said, on the one hand, the Israelis have in fact displaced and have in fact evicted. I mean, they've 90
He meant internal.
Right? Yeah,
he meant internal displacement.
What they want to do is to get rid of people.
That's what he meant.
Their objective, remember at the very beginning, they said it out loud a second.
Was to get rid of all the people of Gaza, right?
To get rid of them all.
South Sudan.
To remove them all to Egypt or Canada or the Gulf or Africa or wherever.
Yeah, that's been a Zionist fantasy. That's been a Zionist fantasy from the beginning of Zionism.
But it remains.
Palestine.
So that's the point. It remains a fantasy at this point. In other words, what they've done is they've inflicted massive harm, but they haven't attained a political objective.
Yeah,
that's what they've managed to do, as I said.
Well, but what about then to go back to this question? I mean, so can we say that the Trump so-called ceasefire, which is a charade in a sense, obviously the degree of killing, of mass slaughter has diminished, but as Mustafa had described and as Karim you were talking about, the numbers of people who are being killed every single day, the sheer misery of life in Gaza continues, and the deliberate policy of making life insufferable in Gaza continues, let alone the West Bank. So to what extent can we say that this Trump plan has, in a sense, succeeded? Because it's taken it off.
Well, it's a process.
Point is to remove it from view and allow the Israelis to do what they want on the ground, and not have people sort of talk about them. To what extent has that succeeded?
I think there's a risk. I think that, and we talked about this with him. There's a risk that people are going to be. There's a certain degree of risk, I think, that people are going to be, confused or misled by this discourse of ceasefire, which
especially the ceasefire, calling it a ceasefire,
which it's like, and obviously it's not a ceasefire. I mean, one side has ceased, the other side continues to fire. It's not a ceasefire, right? So, but on the other hand, I also think the change in Western public opinion, which as you know, for me, that I've said this again and again and again. For me, that's where the key to the whole thing is the transformation of Western public opinion. That is the main site.
It's two sides. Sally, we've had this. It's two sides, and I agree with Mustafa. There is the solidarity which you talk about, and it's absolutely correct. And whatever's going on in the U.S. in particular, I mean, in general, but the U.S. in particular. But sorry, let me just add this. It's also the steadfastness and the resistance. I'm sorry, if you don't add that to the mix, no, it's both. It is both.
No, that's fine. Okay. But I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about something else. What I was saying was, I think at this point, the transformation of Western public opinion has gone so far that basically the opposition to Israel has reached such an extent now that covering it up, putting band-aids over it, isn't going to make it go away. I don't think
censorship. That's what they're trying to do.
And
CBS News and so on.
All of that stuff. I think it's gone. It's like the horse has already left the barn. They're closing the door. It's too late. They're trying to chase after public opinion that has already shifted, and I don't think it's going to go back. Partly because it's so steeped in young people, not just young people, but above all young people. So they had this is like what our South Africa moment was in the 1980s. This is their moment too. The young people realize what's happening. They're not going to go back to this blind adoration of Israel, little innocent Israel beset by evil Arabs.
The evidence is so overwhelming.
The myth, all the myths are gone. Basically, all the myths that Israel relied on for all of these decades, nobody believes that stuff anymore, other than Zionists themselves, and whatever. They're going to believe it to the very end anyway. So, I think that is an important point. I think that
I agree. I think it's a very important point. But I want to maybe we should wrap. But I want to just wrap by coming back to what Mustafa was talking about, which is this question of unity. Again, I think that's his main message. It's I think he said he authored or drafted the Beijing Declaration, which we should link to, about the question of Palestinian unity and the importance of that. And that's why I'm saying that if there is no Palestinian steadfastness and resistance on the one hand, and attempts, political kind of pushing to get some form of unity among the different factions and parties and leaderships, if that doesn't happen, it doesn't matter what goes on in the West. I mean, if Israel is delegitimized or not, if the Palestinians have, in the meantime, been ethnically cleansed, what difference does it make at that point of the solidarity in the West, or there's no solidarity in the West? So these things are they're absolutely interlinked, and it's important to kind of keep the link in mind. It's not one or the other; it's both. And the Israelis are losing in the West, and they're trying very hard to kind of cling on by buying things, by making sure that media and other kinds of forms are kind of pushing their own messages, but they're also working on the ground to create these facts that they've been doing for decades now, but in an opportunity where they think they can do what they want. This resistance and the steadfastness is the absolute importance. And one last point, when I think we should talk about Lebanon and Syria in a forthcoming pod, what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Lebanon also shows the extent to which, even if you do all these agreements, and Mustafa mentioned, I think, 875 violations or so of the ceasefire the past couple of months. In Lebanon, it's been several thousand Israeli violations of the ceasefire here. In Syria, we know what's going on there. So the thing about this, and I really would like to have a podcast on this, is that no matter how many times you make deals with Israelis, even those that want to and feel defeated and you need to do a deal, they won't stop. Like doing a deal, even a total surrender deal, it just will mean that they will continue in another form. So, this will eventually also work against the Israeli project, I think, in the end, over time, even in Syria, in Lebanon, and places like this. But I think we should wrap, guys. All right. Take care.
Yeah.
All right.
That
Good
was
to see you guys.
Great discussion. Thank you.
Bye.